The transport shuttle dropped through the clouds of X Prime, and Taman pressed his face against the window. Below him stretched a city that covered the entire planet. Towers of crystal and metal reached toward the sky, connected by bridges of light. Ships flew between buildings without making any sound. Everything glowed with soft colors that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Next to him, Minho let out a low whistle. The younger engineer had his recording device out, trying to capture everything. His hands shook slightly with excitement. Taman smiled but said nothing. He had seen pictures of alien worlds before, but nothing prepared him for this. Earth's cities were crowded and dirty, full of smoke and noise. This place looked like someone's dream of the future. The Imperial Palace floated above everything else. It was a massive structure made of clear crystal that caught the light and threw rainbows across the sky. The palace hung in the air with no visible support, as if gravity had simply forgotten about it. The shuttle landed on a platform that appeared out of nowhere. One moment there was empty air, the next moment there was solid ground beneath them. Taman picked up his toolbox and stepped out into the alien world. The air smelled wrong. Too clean, too perfect, like someone had removed everything that made air interesting and left only the boring parts. Taman missed the smell of oil and metal from Earth's workshops. A tall figure waited for them at the entrance. She stood over 7 feet high with 4 arms and skin that looked like dark green armor. Her eyes were completely black, reflecting light like polished stones. Commander Velthara of the Imperial Royal Guard. She looked at the 2 humans for a long moment. Her gaze dropped to the heavy metal toolbox in Taman's hand. Then she made a sound that might have been a laugh. Other guards stood behind her, representing different alien species from across the galaxy. They all wore armor that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. Each carried weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. When they saw the toolbox, several of them began making clicking sounds. Taman realized they were laughing. One of the guards stepped forward, his scales gleaming purple in the light. He pointed at the toolbox with one clawed hand. "What is that thing?" he asked in heavily accented human language. "A container for antiques?" Velthara tilted her head. "Those are your tools, human?" Taman nodded. "Yes, Commander." She reached out with one of her 4 hands and opened the toolbox. Inside lay rows of wrenches, hammers, screwdrivers, and measuring tools, all made of simple metal, all old and worn from years of use. Some had tape wrapped around the handles. One wrench had his grandfather's initials scratched into the side. The guards erupted in more clicking laughter. Velthara picked up a hammer and held it like it might explode. She turned it over in her hand, examining it with obvious confusion. "Do humans still hit things with hammers?" asked another guard. This one had feathers instead of hair and eyes that could look in 2 directions at once. "Sometimes," Taman said quietly, "when hitting things is the right solution." This caused even more laughter. Velthara set the hammer back in the box and closed it with a snap. She gestured for them to follow her into the palace. Minho's face was red. He walked close to Taman and whispered, "They're making fun of us." "I know," Taman said. "Doesn't it bother you?" Taman shrugged. "My grandfather used to say, 'Let the work speak, not your pride.' They can laugh all they want." The tools work. The engineering bay was enormous. It stretched as far as Taman could see, filled with machines that he couldn't even begin to understand. Holographic displays floated in the air, showing diagrams and numbers. Robot arms moved on their own, assembling and disassembling components. Everything was automated. Everything was perfect. A being made of what looked like living crystal approached them. His body caught the light and scattered it in patterns across the floor. This was Senior Technician Ralmos, the palace's head engineer. "Welcome to the Imperial Engineering Division," Ralmos said. His voice sounded like wind chimes. "I am told you are here to learn about our technology." "And to share our knowledge," Sujin said. The human diplomat had joined them at the entrance. She was older than both Taman and Minho, with gray in her hair and lines around her eyes that came from years of dealing with alien politics. "This is a cultural exchange program. We learn from each other." Ralmos made a sound that might have been polite agreement. "Of course. Though I confess I am curious what we might learn from manual techniques." He said the last words as if they tasted bad. He began the tour, showing them system after system, the environmental controls that maintained perfect temperature and air quality throughout the palace, the gravity manipulation that kept the entire structure floating, the matter replicators that could create any object from base atoms, the quantum computers that managed everything. All of it is automated, Ralmos explained with obvious pride. Our artificial intelligence monitors every system constantly. It can detect problems before they occur and fix them before anyone notices. Manual intervention is obsolete. The AI can diagnose and repair faster than any biological could even understand the problem. Taman listened politely, but his attention was elsewhere. He watched the machines, studied the connections, felt the vibrations through his boots. Something wasn't right. They reached the heart of the engineering bay, the main reactor. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. A sphere of pure energy contained by fields of shimmering light. It powered the entire palace, producing more energy than a small star. The quantum fusion core was the pride of Imperial technology. Taman set down his toolbox and placed his hand on the metal railing that surrounded the reactor chamber. He closed his eyes and felt, there, a vibration, so slight that most people wouldn't notice it. But Taman had spent 20 years working with fusion reactors on Earth. He knew what a healthy reactor felt like, and this wasn't it. He opened his eyes and looked at Ralmos. The mounting brackets, they're vibrating at a harmonic frequency. The crystal engineer stared at him. What? The generators that create the containment field. The physical brackets that hold them in place. They're loose. The vibration is so small that your sensors probably don't detect it. But it's there. Over time, it will cause the connections to fail. Ralmos walked to a nearby display. Holographic readouts appeared around his hands. He studied them for a long moment. The AI shows green across all systems, he said firmly. Every sensor reads normal. Your primitive senses are unreliable, human. Our technology is perfect. Behind them, several of the guards had followed them into the engineering bay. They started clicking again. Velthara crossed her forearms. The human thinks he can feel problems that our advanced sensors cannot detect, she said. How amusing, Taman said nothing. He picked up his toolbox and followed Minho to the workspace that had been assigned to them. It was in a corner of the bay, away from the important equipment. A place where they wouldn't bother anyone. He spent the rest of the day organizing his tools. Each one had its place. Each one had a purpose. He had learned this from his grandfather, who had learned it from his grandfather before him. Good tools, properly maintained, would last forever. Minho worked beside him, setting up their portable computers and equipment. The young engineer was still angry about the mockery. They treat us like we're stupid, Minho said. Like humans are just primitive children playing with rocks. Maybe we are, Taman said calmly. He held up his grandfather's wrench, turning it in the light. But rocks are useful, they last. They don't crash or malfunction or need updates. Sometimes simple is better. That night Taman couldn't sleep. He lay in his assigned quarters, which were more comfortable than anywhere he had ever lived on Earth, and listened. The palace was never silent. There was always a hum of energy, a whisper of air circulation, a distant vibration of machinery, and beneath it all, that wrong vibration, getting stronger. At 3 a.m. by Earth time, Taman gave up on sleep. He dressed and made his way back to the engineering bay. The guards didn't stop him. They barely looked at him. Just another primitive human wandering around where he didn't belong. The bay was dimly lit and almost empty. A few maintenance robots moved through their programmed patterns. The reactor hummed at the center of everything, its energy field casting strange shadows. Taman approached the railing again. He placed both hands on the metal and closed his eyes. The vibration was definitely stronger. Not by much, but enough. Enough to worry someone who knew what to worry about. He opened his eyes and saw that all the holographic displays showed green. Perfect status. No problems detected. The AI was completely blind to the mechanical issue developing right in front of its sensors. Taman pulled out his portable scanner, one of the few pieces of electronic equipment he carried. It was old Earth technology, simple and reliable. He took readings of the vibration frequency and amplitude. The numbers made his stomach tight with worry. He was about to head back to his quarters when the alarm started. Red light flooded the bay. The humming of the reactor changed pitch, rising to a scream. Holographic displays appeared everywhere, all of them showing red. Error messages cascaded across screens faster than anyone could read them. The containment field around the reactor flickered. For just a moment, Taman saw the raw fusion reaction inside. It was like looking at a piece of the sun. Then the field stabilized, but barely. The reactor was failing. and from the panicked messages scrolling across the displays, Taman understood that the AI had no idea how to fix it. People started running into the bay. Engineers and technicians, all of them moving to their stations. Ralmos appeared, his crystal body flashing with distressed colors. He began shouting orders, but his voice was high with fear. Belthera and her guards arrived, weapons drawn, as if they could fight a reactor malfunction. She saw Taman standing calmly by the railing, and her eyes narrowed. "You," she said. "You were here. What did you do?" Taman met her gaze without fear. "Nothing. I was checking the vibration I told you about. The one your AI couldn't detect." He gestured at the failing reactor. "Now it's too late for detection. Now it's breaking." The commander's four hands clenched into fists. But before she could respond, Ralmos let out a sound like breaking glass. He was staring at his displays, his body flickering through colors that Taman guessed meant terror. "The containment field is collapsing," the technician said. His voice was barely a whisper. "The AI cannot compensate. The system is failing in a way that was never programmed, never predicted. We have no procedure for this." "Then make one," Belthera snapped. "I cannot." Ralmos turned to face them all. "Manual control was never implemented. We relied entirely on automation. Without the AI, we are blind. Without the AI, we cannot fix this." Silence fell across the bay, broken only by the screaming alarms and the dangerous humming of the dying reactor. Then Taman picked up his toolbox. The sound of metal on metal was very loud in the silence. "I can fix it," he said. Every eye in the engineering bay turned to Taman. The alarms continued their screaming. The reactor's containment field flickered and pulsed like a dying heartbeat. Red warning lights painted everything the color of blood. Belthera stared at him, her black eyes reflecting the emergency lights. You think you can fix our most advanced technology with your primitive tools?" "Yes," Taman said. The word was simple and certain. One of the guards made that clicking sound again. Laughter even now, even with death humming in the center of the room. "The human thinks he can save us with a hammer." Minho burst into the bay, his hair messy from sleep. He had his portable computer in his hands, already pulling up data. "Taman, what's happening?" "The vibration I detected," Taman said calmly. "It got worse. The mounting brackets failed." Minho's fingers flew across his screen. Numbers and diagrams appeared. His eyes went wide as he read them. "He was right," Minho said to Ralmos. "Look at this. Mechanical stress analysis from 3 hours ago. The brackets were vibrating at exactly the frequency that would cause metal fatigue. Your AI only monitors quantum states and energy levels. It never checked the physical components." Ralmos moved to look at Minho's screen. His crystal body stopped flashing and went very still. "That's impossible. Our systems are perfect." "Your systems are perfect for the problems they were designed to detect," Taman said. "But they can't see mechanical failure. They can't feel vibration. They can't detect metal getting tired from stress." A new voice filled the bay. It came from everywhere at once, speaking in a language that Taman's translator struggled to process. Then it switched to human language. "This is Empress Shivara. I have been monitoring the situation." A hologram appeared above the reactor. It showed a young alien female with skin like silver and eyes that held galaxies. She wore robes that seemed to be made of starlight. The Empress of the entire Galactic Imperium. Everyone in the bay immediately bowed. Everyone except Taman, who simply nodded respectfully. On Earth, engineers didn't bow to anyone when there was work to be done. The Empress's gaze fixed on him. "You are the human engineer, Taman." "Yes, Your Majesty. You say you can repair the reactor." "I can stabilize the mounting brackets and restore the containment field," Taman said. "But I need time and access to the reactor chamber." Ralmos made a sound like breaking glass. "Your Majesty, that's impossible. A biological cannot survive in the reactor chamber. The radiation alone would kill him in seconds." "How long until complete containment failure?" the Empress asked. Ralmos checked his displays. His body flickered through several colors. 4 hours, maybe less. "And if the containment fails completely?" The technician's voice was barely audible. "The palace will be destroyed." The city below, millions of casualties, silence fell. The only sound was the alarms and the dangerous humming of the failing reactor. The Empress studied Taman for a long moment. "Commander Belthera, your assessment." The tall guard commander stepped forward. Her forearms were crossed, her posture defensive. "The human is unproven. His methods are primitive. I recommend we evacuate the palace and attempt to contain the explosion. That would still result in significant casualties, the Empress said. Yes, Your Majesty. And do we have any other options? Velthara's mandibles clicked together in what Taman guessed was frustration. No, Your Majesty. The Empress turned back to Taman. Then let the human try. We have nothing to lose, she paused, and perhaps something to learn. Taman set down his toolbox and opened it. The sound of the latches clicking seemed very loud. Inside, his tools gleamed under the red emergency lights. Simple metal. Old designs. Proven over generations. I'll need a radiation suit, he said, and someone to monitor my vital signs from outside. Minho can do that. Our radiation suits are designed for our species, Relmo said. They will not fit a human. Minho was already pulling up specifications on his computer. We brought our own suits. Basic Earth design, but they work. They're in our quarters. I'll get them, said Sujin. The diplomat had arrived during the emergency. She looked at Taman with worry in her eyes, but said nothing. She simply ran from the bay. While they waited, Taman studied the reactor. He pulled out a small notebook, actual paper and pencil, and began sketching. The guards watched him with confusion. Who used paper anymore? Who drew things by hand? But Taman had learned that sometimes the best way to understand a problem was to draw it, to see it with your eyes, to trace the connections with your hand. Computers were fast, but they didn't help you think. He sketched the reactor chamber, the 8 containment field generators arranged in a sphere around the core, the mounting brackets that held each generator in place. He marked the points where the vibration would have caused the most stress. Minho looked over his shoulder. You think you can shore up all 8 mounting points in 4 hours? I have to, Taman said simply. Sujin returned with the radiation suits. They looked ancient compared to the alien equipment around them. Thick material, basic shielding, simple cooling systems that used ice packs and reflective coating. The kind of thing Earth engineers had been using for 50 years. One of the guards laughed. That will protect him from a fusion reactor? It looks like it's made from blankets. Taman began putting on the suit. It's made from lead-lined polymer, ceramic heat tiles, and reflective metal. Same basic design we've used since we first started working with nuclear reactors. Simple, reliable, effective. He sealed the helmet and checked the seals. The suit's display showed all green. Oxygen flow normal. Cooling system active. Radiation shielding at maximum. Minho handed him a comm unit. I'll be watching your vitals. If your radiation exposure gets too high, I'm pulling you out. Fair enough, Taman said. He picked up his toolbox. Inside the suit, he could hear his own breathing, steady and calm. He had done dangerous repairs before. This was just another job. Just another reactor that needed fixing. He walked to the entrance of the reactor chamber. A massive door of metal and energy field stood between him and the failing core. Ralmos operated the controls with shaking hands. The door began to open. Heat rolled out like a physical thing. Even through the suit, Taman felt it. The temperature inside the chamber was hot enough to melt most metals. The radiation levels would kill an unprotected person before they took 3 steps. Taman stepped through the doorway. The reactor chamber was like standing inside a star. The core itself was a sphere of contained fusion reactions, so bright that even through his helmet's protective filters it hurt to look at directly. 8 generators surrounded it, each one producing the quantum fields that kept the fusion contained. Each generator was mounted on brackets that were supposed to hold them perfectly stable. 3 of the brackets had already failed. The generators hung at wrong angles, their fields fluctuating. The other 5 brackets showed visible stress cracks. They could fail at any moment. Minho's voice crackled in his helmet. I'm reading your suit temperature at critical levels already. You need to work fast. Understood, Taman said. He set down his toolbox and pulled out his magnetic boots. The floor of the chamber was metal, designed for maintenance robots that never had to actually maintain anything. He activated the magnets and took his first careful step toward the nearest damaged bracket. In the engineering bay, everyone watched on monitors. The cameras showed Taman as a small figure in a bulky suit, moving through an environment that should kill him. The guards had stopped laughing. They watched in silence. Velthara stood with her arms crossed, but her posture had changed. She was no longer dismissive. She was watching like she would watch a warrior going into battle. Taman reached the first bracket. Up close, he could see the damage clearly. The metal had vibrated so long that it had actually deformed. The connections were loose. The generator was hanging by maybe half the support it needed. He pulled out his wrench, the same wrench the guards had mocked. He fitted it to the first bolt and began to tighten. The metal resisted, warped from stress and heat. He applied steady pressure, using techniques his grandfather had taught him. Don't force it. Feel the metal. Let it tell you what it needs. The bolt turned. Just a little, then a little more. Taman worked it carefully, tightening it as much as the damaged threads would allow. That's not enough, Minho said, reading the structural data. The threads are stripped. It won't hold. I know, Taman said. He pulled out a metal plate from his toolbox, one of several he had cut and prepared while waiting for the suit. He positioned it as a reinforcement brace, held it with one hand and pulled out his welding torch with the other. The torch flared to life, adding its own heat to the already impossible temperature. Taman began welding the brace to the bracket, his movements precise despite the bulky suit and the heat and the radiation. In the bay, one of the guards whispered, "He's welding inside an active reactor." Another guard responded, "That's impossible." Lieutenant Kexon, Velthara's second-in-command, shook his feathered head slowly. "No," he said quietly. "He's doing it. We're watching him do it." Taman finished the first weld and moved to the next mounting point. His suit's cooling system was working at maximum capacity. Sweat ran down his face inside the helmet. His hands were steady. He worked for an hour, then two. Each bracket required careful assessment, precise welding, constant adjustment. The heat was overwhelming. The radiation alarms in his suit beeped constantly. Minho kept updating him on his exposure levels, his voice getting more worried with each report. But Taman continued. He had a job to do. The palace needed him. The millions of people in the city below needed him. That was enough. He reached the 6th bracket and was preparing to weld when one of the generators sparked violently. A surge of energy lashed out, hitting him square in the chest. The force threw him backward. He slammed into the chamber wall, his suit tearing on a sharp piece of metal. Alarms screamed in his helmet. The suit had breached. Radiation was getting in. The temperature inside his suit spiked immediately. Minho's voice was shouting, "Taman, abort. Your suit is breached. Get out now." Velthara was already moving toward the chamber door. "I'm pulling him out," but the Empress's hologram spoke. "Wait." Everyone turned to look at her. She was watching the monitor that showed Taman, her expression unreadable. On the screen, Taman was pulling himself up. Blood ran down his face from a cut above his eye. His suit was torn and sparking. The radiation levels around him were lethal. He pulled out a roll of industrial tape from his toolbox, the same kind of tape that held the handles on some of his tools. He began wrapping it around the tear in his suit, layering it thick. "That won't hold," Ralmos said. Taman pressed the tape down firmly, sealing the breach as best he could. The radiation alarms in his suit quieted slightly. Not fixed, but better. Maybe good enough. He picked up his welding torch and walked back to the 6th bracket. "Not done yet," he said. His voice was calm despite everything. 2 more hours. 8 brackets. I can do this, and he went back to work. Taman's hands shook as he welded the 7th bracket. Not from fear, but from exhaustion. He had been inside the reactor chamber for over 2 hours. The heat was beyond anything he had ever experienced. His suit's cooling system had failed 30 minutes ago. Now he was cooking slowly inside his own protective gear. Sweat poured down his face, stinging his eyes. The cut above his eyebrow had stopped bleeding, but the dried blood made his vision hazy. His lungs burned with every breath. The air recycler in his suit was struggling. Too much heat, too much contamination from the breach. But his hands remained steady. Decades of training kept them moving with precision. Muscle memory took over when conscious thought became too difficult. Weld check, reinforce. Move to the next point, repeat. In the engineering bay, Minho stared at his screen in horror. The numbers told a story he didn't want to read. Taman's core temperature was dangerously high. His radiation exposure had exceeded safe limits 20 minutes ago. His heart rate was irregular. His oxygen saturation was dropping. "He's dying," Minho said. His voice cracked. "We have to pull him out." Sujin put a hand on his shoulder. She looked old suddenly, the weight of command showing in her eyes. "We can't. If he stops now, we all die. The entire city dies. So we just watch him kill himself?" "We watch him save us," Velthara said. The commander had not moved from her position in front of the monitor. She stood rigid, all forearms at her sides, her black eyes fixed on the small figure working inside the hellish chamber. This is what warriors do. They sacrifice for others. Lieutenant Kexon stood beside her. I didn't know humans were warriors. Neither did I, Velthara said quietly. I was wrong. Taman finished the 7th bracket and paused to catch his breath. His vision was getting blurry. The chamber seemed to tilt around him. He checked his suit's diagnostics out of habit, but the display was mostly red. Everything was failing. The tape patch on his chest barely held. Radiation was seeping through. One more bracket. Just one more. Then he could stabilize the containment field and everyone would be safe. He pushed off toward the 8th and final mounting point. His magnetic boots felt heavy, each step requiring conscious effort. The reactor core hummed beside him, close enough to touch. So much power, contained by fields that were hanging on by threads. Literally. The 8th bracket was in the worst position, high up on the chamber wall. He would have to climb. Normally easy with magnetic boots and a safety harness, but nothing was normal anymore. Taman clipped his harness to a support beam and began climbing. Hand over hand, boot after boot. The wall was smooth metal, designed for maintenance robots that could fly, not for humans who had to climb like ancient mountaineers. His hand slipped. For a terrifying moment, he hung by one magnetic boot and the harness. The toolbox on his belt swung wildly. Tools that had belonged to his grandfather, that had been passed down through generations, threatened to fall into the reactor core. He grabbed the wall with both hands, fingers finding holds that weren't really there. He pulled himself up through sheer determination. His muscles screamed. His lungs burned. But he climbed. The guards in the bay watched in silence. No one was laughing now. No one was making jokes about primitive tools or simple humans. They watched a man push past every limit, do the impossible because it needed to be done. How is he still moving? One guard whispered. Human stubbornness, Ralmos said. The crystal technician's body glowed with colors that suggested respect, maybe even awe. We automated everything because we thought machines were better. We forgot that sometimes the best machine is determination. Taman reached the 8th bracket. The damage here was the worst. The vibration had actually cracked the support beam. Metal fatigue had spread like cancer through the structure. This wasn't something he could just weld and brace. This needed major reconstruction. He pulled out his tools and began assessing the damage. His training took over again, even as his body threatened to quit. Look at the problem. Break it into steps. Solve each step. Don't think about the whole thing, just the next piece. First, remove the damaged section. He used a cutting torch, carefully slicing away the cracked metal. The pieces fell away, tumbling toward the reactor core. They vaporized before hitting the containment field. Second, fabricate a replacement. But he didn't have the right materials. The brackets were made of advanced alloys designed for quantum stability. He had earth metals, simple steel, and aluminum. He keyed his comm. Mino, I need materials. Strong metal. Anything that can handle high heat and radiation. Minho's voice was tight with worry. Like what? Taman? We don't have anything rated for those conditions. Taman looked around the chamber. His eyes fell on one of the disabled maintenance robots. It was made of heat-resistant alloy designed to work near the reactor. There, he said, pointing even though no one could see. The maintenance robots. Bring me whatever pieces you can get off them. In the bay, the guards looked at each other. Then, without being ordered, they moved. They ran to where the inactive robots were stored. They began pulling them apart with their bare hands, ripping off panels and support struts. Ancient warriors helping a human engineer by tearing apart machines. Velthara herself brought the pieces to the chamber entrance. She fed them through the small airlock designed for tools, watching as Taman retrieved each piece from inside. Can you really build something from this scrap? She asked. Taman took a piece of metal plating, turned it over in his shaking hands. My grandfather used to say a good engineer can fix anything with anything. It's not about having the right materials. It's about understanding what materials do. He began welding, not carefully now, but with desperate speed. He melted down pieces of robot plating, forming them into a new support structure. It was ugly, rough, nothing like the precision-engineered original. But it was strong. It would hold. Sweat ran into his eyes. His hands were blistering inside his gloves. The heat finally too much for even the thick material to protect against. But he kept welding, laying metal, fusing it, building something new from scraps. The Empress watched from her hologram. She had been silent for an hour, simply observing. Now she spoke, and her voice held wonder. "He is not just repairing it," she said. "He is creating, building something from nothing there in the heart of destruction." Ralmos studied his displays. The structural integrity of his improvised bracket is actually better than the original. The mixed metals are distributing stress more evenly. How is that possible? Experience, Sujin said. She had tears running down her face, watching her colleague work himself to death to save strangers. He's been doing this his entire life. He knows metal like you know quantum physics. He feels it. Taman finished the main support and began adding reinforcement struts. Each one was custom cut, custom shaped, fitted perfectly to distribute the load. It was beautiful work, even if it looked like something built from garbage. The reactor gave a sudden surge. Energy crackled across the chamber. One of the containment field generators sparked and flickered. The fields were collapsing. Minutes left, maybe seconds. Taman didn't pause. He couldn't. He had maybe 3 more welds to complete. 3 points where metal needed to fuse with metal. 3 chances to get it right before everyone died. His vision went dark for a moment. Heat exhaustion or radiation sickness, he couldn't tell. Didn't matter. He blinked until he could see again, found the next weld point, positioned his torch. First weld. Clean. Strong. The reactor surged again. The containment field dropped to critical levels. Alarms that had been screaming suddenly went silent. That was worse. That meant the systems had given up, accepted failure. Second weld. His hands were shaking badly now. He had to hold his wrist with his other hand to keep the torch steady. Metal flowed, joined, held one more. Just one more. In the bay, Minho was shouting at his screen. The containment field is at 3%. It's going to fail. How long? Velthara demanded. 30 seconds. Maybe less. Everyone turned to the monitor. Taman was positioning his torch at the final weld point. His movements were slow, each action taking visible effort. He was dying in there, and they were all watching it happen. Taman lined up the torch. His grandfather's voice echoed in his memory. Take your time, even when time is short. 1 good weld beats 10 fast ones. Quality matters. He triggered the torch. Metal melted, flowed, bonded. He moved the torch slowly, carefully, creating a perfect bead of molten metal. The weld line was straight, even strong. Beautiful. The containment field dropped to 1%. Taman completed the weld and shut off the torch. The bracket was done. All 8 mountings were now reinforced, stabilized, stronger than they had ever been. Now, he whispered into the comm, restart the field generators. All of them at once. Ralmos's hands flew across his controls. Energy surged through the system. The 8 generators came online simultaneously, their quantum fields snapping into place around the reactor core. The containment field stabilized. The wild fluctuations smoothed out. The dangerous humming faded to a steady, healthy purr. The reactor was stable. The crisis was over, and Taman collapsed. He fell in slow motion, his magnetic boots losing power. He tumbled through the air of the reactor chamber, unconscious, his mission complete. Velthara moved before anyone could react. She hit the emergency controls, overriding every safety protocol. The chamber door blasted open. She ran inside without a suit, without protection, her armor the only thing between her and lethal radiation. She caught Taman before he hit the floor, forearms wrapped around his small, fragile human body. She ran back out, moving faster than should have been possible. The door slammed shut behind her. Guards rushed forward with medical equipment. Minho was there, frantically checking vital signs. Sujin was calling for human medical specialists. Velthara laid Taman down gently. She removed his helmet with careful hands. His face was pale, covered in sweat and blood. Burns marked his skin. But he was breathing. Barely, but breathing. The commander stood and looked at her guards. Every single one of them stood at attention, weapons raised in salute. Not mocking now, not laughing, honoring. He saved us, Lieutenant Kexon said. He saved everyone, Velthara corrected. She looked down at the unconscious human, this small creature who had done the impossible with nothing but old tools and determination, with hammers and wrenches and tape, with things we mocked. He saved an entire city. Ralmos was checking his displays, his crystal body pulsing with light. This is remarkable. The reactor is not just stable, it's running more efficiently than before. His modifications improved the field distribution by 18%. Minho looked up from checking Taemin's vital signs. You're saying he made it better? Better than your perfect technology? Yes, Ralmo said simply. He built something better from scrap. In the heart of a dying star, he forged something new, something stronger. The Empress's hologram flickered. When she spoke, her voice was soft but filled with emotion that her translator could barely convey. We have forgotten so much, she said. In our pursuit of perfection, we lost the ability to adapt, to create, to survive with nothing but skill and will. She looked at Taemin. This human has reminded us what it means to be strong. Taemin woke up slowly. Everything hurt. His skin felt like fire. His lungs burned with each breath. His head pounded with a rhythm that matched his heartbeat. But he was alive. He opened his eyes to a white ceiling that glowed with soft light. Medical equipment surrounded his bed, though he didn't recognize most of it. Alien technology, probably keeping him alive in ways human medicine never could. His hands were wrapped in bandages that looked like they were made of living tissue. They pulsed gently, probably delivering medication or healing nanobots or something equally advanced. He tried to move his fingers. They responded slowly and painfully, but they worked. A figure stood by the door. Tall, four-armed, unmistakable. Commander Velthara had been standing guard. How long had she been there? When she saw him wake, she moved closer. Her black eyes studied his face. Then she did something Taemin had never seen an alien do. She placed one hand over her heart in what had to be a gesture of respect. You have slept for 3 days, she said. Her voice was softer than before. The healer said you would live, but we were not certain. Taemin tried to speak. His throat was dry, his voice rough. The reactor? Stable. Better than stable. Your repairs improved its efficiency beyond what our engineers thought possible. She paused. You saved the palace. You saved the city. You saved millions of lives. He nodded slowly. Good. The job was done. That was all that mattered. Velthara continued. I owe you an apology. We all do. We mocked your tools, your methods, your species. We were arrogant fools who forgot that strength takes many forms. You didn't know, Taemin said. His grandfather had taught him not to hold grudges. Different cultures, different experiences. You learned. That's what matters. The door opened and Minho rushed in. When he saw Taemin awake, his face broke into a huge smile.
You're alive!
I thought, when you collapsed. He couldn't finish the sentence. Hard to kill, Taemin said with a small smile. Grandfather used to say we humans are like old tools. Beat us up, throw us in fire, and we just get stronger. Sujin entered next, followed by Ralmos. The crystal technician's body glowed with colors that Taemin's translator identified as respect and gratitude. I have studied your repairs, Ralmos said without preamble. I do not understand how they work so well. The materials are inferior. The construction is crude by our standards, yet the results are superior. It defies logic. Taemin tried to sit up. Pain shot through his body, but he managed it with Minho's help. It's not about the materials. It's about understanding how materials behave under stress. You designed the reactor for perfect conditions, but nothing stays perfect. My repairs account for imperfection. They adapt. Fascinating, Ralmos said. Our AI could never think that way. It cannot plan for imperfection. It only knows perfection or failure. That's the problem with perfect systems, Taemin said. They're fragile. They only work under perfect conditions. Real engineering is about making things work when conditions are terrible. The room suddenly filled with light. A hologram appeared, larger and more detailed than before. The Empress materialized in the center of the medical bay, her form so realistic that she seemed to actually be there. Everyone immediately bowed. Taemin tried to bow from his bed, but the Empress raised one hand. Please do not strain yourself. You have already given enough. She looked at him with those galaxy-filled eyes. I have come to offer you a position, Taemin. Imperial Master Engineer, with full authority to reform our approach to technology and training. Name your terms. Anything you wish. Taemin was quiet for a moment. It was a generous offer. More generous than anything he could have imagined. To reshape how an entire galactic civilization approached engineering, it was the opportunity of a lifetime. But he thought of Earth, of the workshops where he had learned his trade, of the other engineers who needed to know that humans had value, that their skills mattered. Thank you, Your Majesty, but I must decline the permanent position. He saw shock on every face in the room. However, I would be honored to stay for 6 months as a teacher. Train your engineers in fundamental principles. Show them how to work with their hands, how to understand materials, how to think without AI. The Empress smiled. A wise answer. You do not seek power only to share knowledge. Very well, 6 months as our teacher. And in return, we will share our advanced material science with Earth. A true exchange of knowledge. Deal, Taman said. The Empress's hologram faded, but her final words echoed. You have changed the Imperium more in 3 days than most change it in a lifetime. Thank you, Engineer Taman. Over the next few days, Taman recovered quickly. Alien medicine was remarkable. The burns healed without scars. The radiation damage was reversed at a cellular level. Within a week, he was strong enough to leave the medical bay. His first stop was the engineering bay. He wanted to see his repairs to check if they were holding. But when he arrived, he stopped in surprise. The bay had been transformed. Half of it was still filled with advanced alien technology, but the other half now held workbenches, simple tables with hand tools organized on them, wrenches, hammers, welding torches, real physical tools, and at those workbenches sat guards, royal guards, some of the most elite warriors in the galaxy, learning how to use a wrench. Lieutenant Kexon was attempting to tighten a bolt, his feathered face scrunched in concentration. Another guard was practicing welding, the torch looking tiny in his massive claws. Velthara stood overseeing them. When she saw Taman, she approached and gestured to the scene. We are warriors, she said, and a true warrior respects all forms of strength. If engineering is a battlefield, then we must learn to fight on it. She held up her plasma weapon. On the grip, someone had welded a small wrench. A reminder that sometimes the simplest tool is the most powerful. Taman felt pride swell in his chest, not for himself, but for what this represented. Understanding, growth, change. Over the following weeks, Taman began his work as a teacher. His first class had 20 students, 10 aliens from various species, each one an accomplished engineer by Imperium standards, and 10 humans sent from Earth to learn from both cultures. The first lesson was simple. He gave each student a broken machine and a box of mixed parts. No computers, no AI, no diagnostic equipment, just tools in their own minds. Fix it, he said. The alien students were confused. They kept asking for scanners, for diagnostic readouts, for AI assistance. The human students weren't much better. They had grown up with computers, too. They wanted instruction manuals. Taman walked among them. Touch it. Listen to it. Feel how the parts move. The machine will tell you what's wrong if you pay attention. It took hours. Some students wanted to quit. But slowly, one by one, they started to understand. They began feeling the machines listening to them, using their senses instead of sensors. And when the first student successfully repaired their machine, without any technological assistance, just hands and tools and understanding, the entire class erupted in cheers. Lieutenant Kexon became Taman's first apprentice. The feathered guard had initially joined the class as a joke, a way to understand the primitive human. But he discovered he loved the work. He loved the feeling of creating something with his own hands, of understanding how things worked at a fundamental level. I spent my life learning to destroy things, Kexon said one day while they worked together on a training project. This is the first time I have learned to build. It feels important. Ralmus was perhaps the most changed. The crystal technician had been humiliated by his failure during the reactor crisis. He could have become bitter, could have blamed Taman for showing his weakness. Instead, he became the most dedicated student. 6 months passed quickly. Taman had trained over 200 engineers from a dozen different species. Some had become excellent hands-on technicians. Others had learned enough to teach the fundamentals to their own people. All of them understood now that technology served the engineer, not the other way around. The engineering bay had become a place of collaboration. Alien engineers worked alongside human engineers, each learning from the other. Advanced quantum computers ran alongside simple mechanical calculators. Precision robots worked next to craftsmen with hand tools. It was messy and chaotic and beautiful. Ralmos had become the program's most vocal supporter. The crystal technician now spent half his time working with his hands, actually touching and understanding the machines he maintained. He had even started wearing a tool belt, something that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. I was blind, he told a group of new students one day. Taman watched from the back of the room. I could see the numbers and the energy readings, but I could not see the machine itself. Engineer Taman taught me to open my eyes. Now I see that every machine has a voice if you learn to listen. Lieutenant Kexon had become a full-time engineering student. He still trained with the Royal Guard, but he spent every free moment in the workshop. His feathered hands had proven surprisingly good at detailed work. He had a talent for understanding how parts fit together, how systems interacted. When I return to my home world, Kexon said while working on a project with Taman, I will teach these methods to our young. We have warriors who guard the body, but we need warriors who guard knowledge. Engineers who can build in any conditions with any materials. The final week of Taman's teaching term arrived. The Empress had called for a departure ceremony. It would be held in the main palace hall, with representatives from across the Imperium attending. Taman wasn't comfortable with formal events, but he understood their importance. This was about more than him. It was about recognizing the value of human knowledge. The morning of the ceremony, Taman stood in his quarters, packing his belongings. His original toolbox sat on the table. The tools looked the same as when he had arrived. Same scratches, same worn handles, same character, but they meant something different now. They were no longer primitive. They were foundational. Minho knocked and entered. The young engineer had grown during their time here. More confident, more skilled. He had learned as much from the aliens as he had taught them. Are you ready? Minho asked. Almost, Taman said. He closed the toolbox and secured the latches. The sound was familiar, comforting. Some things never changed. You're staying for another year? Minho nodded. Someone needs to continue the program, and Sujin has negotiated permanent exchange positions. 20 human engineers will always be here. 20 alien engineers will always be on Earth. Continuous learning. Good, Taman said. That's how it should be. Knowledge flows both ways. They walked together through the palace halls. Taman had memorized this route over the past 6 months. Past the engineering bay where his students still worked. Past the reactor chamber where he had nearly died. Past the quarters where he had spent countless nights studying alien technology. The main hall was enormous. It could hold thousands, and today it seemed like every seat was filled. Aliens of every imaginable species sat in attendance. Some had traveled from distant worlds just for this ceremony. They wanted to see the human who had changed everything. The entire Royal Guard stood at attention along the walls. Every single one wore a small wrench welded to their weapon or armor, a symbol of what they had learned. Velthara stood at the head of the formation, her forearms holding her ceremonial weapons. When Taman entered, everyone stood. The sound of thousands of beings rising filled the hall. It was overwhelming. He was just an engineer, just a man with tools. This felt like too much, but Sujin had prepared him for this. Let them honor you, she had said. Not for your ego, but so others know that humans deserve respect. That our knowledge matters. This is bigger than you. So Taman walked down the center aisle with his head high, his toolbox in his hand. He walked past beings who could manipulate gravity, who could process information faster than any computer, who could reshape matter with their thoughts, and they all watched him with respect. The Empress waited on her throne. It was made of crystallized light, constantly shifting and reforming. She stood as Taman approached, a gesture of respect that caused whispers throughout the hall. Empresses did not stand for anyone. Engineer Taman, she said, her voice carrying through the hall without any need for amplification. You came to us as a student in a cultural exchange program. You will leave as a teacher who has transformed how we think about technology and knowledge. She descended from her throne and stood before him. She was taller than him, as most aliens were, but she looked at him as an equal. You saved millions of lives with tools we mocked. You taught us that advancement is not about replacing the old with the new, but understanding when each is appropriate. You showed us that true mastery means working with your hands and your mind together. She held out a crystal disc, flat and glowing. This contains honorary membership in the Imperial Academy of Sciences, lifetime access to our knowledge repositories, and a promise. Anytime humanity needs the Imperium's assistance, we will answer. We are allies now, not just neighbors in space. Taman took the disc and bowed. Thank you, Your Majesty. I hope the alliance brings wisdom to both our peoples. The Empress smiled. It already has. She raised her voice to address the entire hall. Let it be known throughout the Imperium. Humanity is not primitive. Their knowledge is not obsolete. They are our partners in understanding the universe. Respect them as you respect any advanced civilization. The hall erupted in sound. Not applause as humans would do, but each species' own expression of approval. Clicks, whistles, harmonic tones, electromagnetic pulses. It created a symphony of respect. Velthara approached next. She carried something wrapped in the same cloth she had used for the tool set. But this was larger, heavier. She unwrapped it carefully. It was a weapon, but not like her plasma rifles or energy blades. It was a hammer, made of the same advanced alloys as her armor, with a handle that perfectly fit human hands. Inscribed along the head were words in both human and imperial languages. To build is to protect, Velthara translated. This is a warrior's hammer. Not for destruction, but for creation. The Royal Guard commissioned it specifically for you. May you forge many more sons. Taman took the hammer. It was perfectly balanced. The weight distribution ideal for both delicate work and heavy strikes. He could feel the quality in every molecule. This was a tool that would last forever. I will treasure this, he said, and I will use it. Tools are meant to be used. Velthara extended her hand in the human gesture she had learned. He gripped it and she pulled him into what humans called a hug. Her forearms surrounded him and she spoke quietly so only he could hear. You are the fiercest warrior I have ever met. Not with weapons, but with will. Go home, teach your people, and know that you will always have allies here. After the ceremony, there was a reception. Taman spent hours talking with engineers, scientists, and diplomats. They all wanted to know about Earth, about human methods, about what other knowledge humanity might share. He answered every question patiently, knowing that each conversation was building bridges between species. Finally, as the sun set over Vex Prime, it was time to leave. His shuttle waited on the same platform where he had arrived 6 months ago. Then he had been an unknown engineer with a toolbox. Now he was leaving as a teacher who had changed a civilization. Minho, Sujin, Ralmos, Kexan, and Velthara came to see him off. His students gathered too. Over 200 engineers from across the galaxy, all wearing tool belts now. All ready to work with their hands as well as their minds. This is not goodbye, Minho said. We will see each other again. The exchange program will bring us together many times. Take care of them, Taman said. All of them. They have the foundation now. They just need practice, Sujin hugged him. You did what I hoped but never dared expect. You showed them who we really are. Ralmos approached last. The crystal technician held out a small device. I made this. A communicator tuned specifically to reach me. If you ever need advice or if Earth needs assistance with any engineering challenge, contact me. I will help. Taman took the device. Thank you. And remember, feel the machines. Listen to them. They will tell you what they need. He boarded the shuttle with his original toolbox in one hand and his new tool set from the guards in the other. The warrior's hammer was secured in a special case. As the shuttle lifted off, he looked out the window one last time. The Imperial Palace floated in the evening light, its crystal structure glowing. At its heart, the reactor he had repaired hummed steadily, stronger than ever, more efficient than ever. A sun forged from scrap metal and determination. The shuttle climbed through the atmosphere and into space. Stars appeared, millions of them, each one a sun like the reactor he had saved. Each one a reminder that the universe was vast and full of challenges. But humans were ready for those challenges, not because they had the best technology or the most advanced weapons, but because they had something else: adaptability, determination, the ability to look at a problem and figure out a solution with whatever was available. Taman opened his original toolbox one more time. He ran his fingers over his grandfather's wrench, feeling the worn metal, the scratches that told stories of a lifetime of work. These tools had saved a world, had taught a galaxy, had proven that old did not mean useless. He thought about what awaited him on Earth. There would be other engineers to train, other students to teach. The Imperium was sending 20 engineers to Earth as part of the exchange. They would need teachers who understood both cultures. Taman would be busy. Good. He had never been comfortable being idle. The shuttle's computer announced they were ready for the jump to faster-than-light travel. Taman settled into his seat and closed his eyes. 6 months ago, he had been nervous about meeting aliens, worried about being mocked, uncertain about humanity's place in the galaxy. Now he knew. Humanity's place was wherever they chose to go. They would adapt, learn, grow. They would forge suns from scrap and build bridges between species. They would show the galaxy that strength came in many forms. The shuttle jumped. Space twisted and folded. They were on their way home. 2 weeks later, Taman walked into his old workshop on Earth. It was small and crowded, smelling of oil and metal and human industry. Nothing like the perfect, clean engineering bay of the Imperial Palace. It was home. His old colleagues were waiting. They had heard the stories, heard that he had saved an alien world, that he had taught aliens to use tools, that he had changed everything. They looked at him with new respect, maybe even some awe. But Taman just set down his toolbox, took off his jacket, and rolled up his sleeves. There was a fusion reactor in the corner that needed maintenance. Work was work, whether on Earth or halfway across the galaxy. So, one of his colleagues said, "Is it true? Did you really fix their reactor with just hand tools?" Taman picked up his grandfather's wrench and smiled. Hand tools and the knowledge of how to use them. Sometimes that's all you need. He walked to the reactor and placed his hand on the metal housing, felt the vibration, listened to the hum, understood what the machine was telling him. Some things never changed. Some knowledge was eternal. Behind him, his colleagues began discussing the alien engineers who would arrive next month. There was excitement in their voices, eagerness to learn and teach. The exchange program was changing Earth too, opening minds, expanding possibilities. Taman began his work on the reactor, his movements precise and practiced. This was what he was, an engineer, a builder, someone who fixed things that were broken and made them stronger than before. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders. Humanity had just begun to explore it. There would be challenges ahead, problems that seemed impossible. But humans would face them the same way they always had. With tools, knowledge, determination, and the refusal to give up, they would adapt. They would learn, they would build, and when necessary, they would forge suns from scrap. That was the human way. That was why the aliens had stopped mocking and started respecting. Not because humans had the best technology or the most advanced weapons, but because humans never quit, never stopped trying to find a solution, never gave up even when facing impossible odds. Humanity. Fuck yeah. But Taman didn't say that out loud. He just smiled, picked up his wrench, and continued working. The reactor needed him. The galaxy needed engineers who understood fundamentals. Earth needed to prepare for its new role as a partner to advanced civilizations. There was work to do. There was always work to do, and Taman was ready. The end.